The lights don't go out all at once. In Kiev, they die block by block. First, an apartment tower goes dark in the distance, then a street of cafes, then a whole district along the river swallowed by night. From space, you'd see it like an ink stain spreading across the map of Ukraine. On the ground, it feels like something else. Russia turning off the dimmer switch on an entire country. While 1,000 kilometers away in Berlin, people in suits talk about peace. What you're about to hear is a dramatized reconstruction inspired by real missile and drone campaigns against Ukraine's power grid, and the real peace talks now happening in Europe. Talks where Donald Trump's envoys say a deal is closer than ever. It is not a leak. It's not classified. It's a story built from open-source reporting and the logic of how both sides fight this war. Our story starts in the dark. It's just after 10 p.m. in a Kiev suburb. Olena stands at her kitchen window watching snow swirl around the streetlights. Her phone sits on the counter, charging off a cheap power bank she bought after the blackouts last winter. She's learned the routine. Always have one battery topping off while another one rests. She glances at the clock. The air raid app hasn't sounded yet tonight. For once, it feels calm. Her teenage son is on the couch, headphones in, playing some game that lets him pretend the war is somewhere else. Her husband is at work on a night shift at a substation on the edge of the city, part of the fragile network keeping power flowing. She sends him a quick message. "Everything quiet? How long do we have power tonight?" He replies with a single emoji. In the control room of a regional grid center not far away, a group of engineers and technicians stare at screens that show the entire electric nervous system of their region. Little icons represent power plants, substations, transmission lines. Some are still scarred red from damage months ago. Others blink yellow, fragile, patched together with whatever equipment they could salvage. They know Russia has been here before. Winter after winter, Moscow has launched waves of missiles and drones aimed at turning Ukraine's grid into rubble, forcing blackouts, freezing apartments, and trying to break the will of a country by making every night a survival test, not just a war. Tonight, rumors say another wave might be coming. But rumors don't flick your lights off. Missiles do. Hundreds of miles away in western Russia, engines rumble. At one airfield, 295 bombers taxi into position, wings heavy with cruise missiles. At another, truck-mounted launchers raise canisters into firing position. Somewhere else, a crew preps a swarm of Shahed-style drones, cheap, noisy, and terrifying when they come in low over sleeping neighborhoods. The orders are simple. Hit the grid, break the power, squeeze Ukraine just a little harder, right when its leaders are sitting at the peace table. Because in Moscow's eyes, the timing is perfect. While diplomats in Berlin talk about security guarantees and ceasefires, Russian planners want their own message on the table. We still decide how cold your winter is. In Berlin, the lights never flicker. In a glittering conference room with chandeliers and polished wood, a different battle plays out. On one side of the long table sits the Ukrainian delegation, tired, suspicious, desperate not to look desperate. On the other side, Trump's envoys, real estate developer Steve Witkoff, political operator Jared Kushner, and a small army of American and European advisors. They talk about a historic chance to end the war and security guarantees stronger than NATO membership on paper. Everyone in the room has a different clock ticking in their head. For the Americans, it's political. How long before voters get tired of funding Ukraine? For the Europeans, it's strategic. How long before their own cities become targets if the war drags on? For the Ukrainians, it's physical. How long before the next missile hits an apartment building, or a power plant, or a school? Trump himself has just told the cameras the deal is closer than ever. He's spoken of constructive talks, of both sides wanting peace, of a plan that could lock in Ukraine's security with US-backed guarantees. Out here in Berlin, it almost sounds believable. Back in Kyiv, a siren finally starts to wail. It cuts through the quiet of Olena's apartment, through her son's headphones, through the TV show her neighbor is half watching next door. On her phone, the alert pops up. Mass missile launch detected, take shelter. She doesn't run to the basement, she's done that too many times. Instead, she moves into the hallway, away from windows, the way civil defense videos taught her. She plugs in a second power bank, just in case the first one dies. Her husband at the substation snaps into drill mode. He and his team know what's coming. A wave of missile tracks on their screens, followed by phone calls from the national dispatcher telling them which sections to disconnect to avoid catastrophic cascading failures. They can't stop the missiles, but they can sacrifice parts of the network to save others. Over the border in Poland, NATO radar sites pick up the launch signatures. US and European analysts watched this pattern all last winter. Bombers take off, missiles launch, drones follow. Tonight's wave hits the same familiar targets. Power plants, transformer yards, high voltage lines leading into big cities. In the Berlin conference room, phones buzz simultaneously. Advisors glance at messages, then at each other. One leans over and whispers to the lead American negotiator. They've started another big strike, energy infrastructure again, Kyiv, maybe Odessa, Ternopil, all over. The negotiator doesn't flinch, but his jaw tightens. He knows what that means. Every time Russia launches one of these massive attacks, Ukrainian public anger spikes. Support for compromise shrivels. The political cost of any deal that smells like capitulation skyrockets. He also knows something else. If you only stare at the map, you miss the people. So let's go back to them. The first wave hits in the south. In Odessa, an older couple sits in their kitchen wrapped in blankets when the windows flash white. A split second later, a low, rolling boom moves through their building. The power flickers, dies, then tries to claw its way back. This time it doesn't. The fridge sighs once and goes silent. The heater stops. On the edge of the city, a substation burns, transformers spewing fire and smoke into the night. Closer to the front lines in eastern Ukraine, a different kind of strike lands. Cruise missiles aimed at power plants that keep trains moving and factories running. In one city, a plant that was just patched back together after a previous attack now takes another hit, undoing weeks of repair work in one blast. Across the country, air defenses are working overtime. Patriot batteries, German Iris-T systems, NASAMS launchers, they all come alive, hurling interceptors into the air, trying to thin the incoming storm. They save lives, they save buildings, they cannot save everything. On the map in the Berlin conference room, a digital overlay shows where the strikes are landing. The Ukrainian delegation watches the red icons blossom across their homeland. Thermal signatures of explosions, fires starting at critical infrastructure sites. One Ukrainian official slams a fist on the table. "Tell me again," he says to the Americans, "how we're closer than ever to peace while he's blacking out our cities?" The US envoy chooses his words carefully. "He's under pressure too," he says. "These strikes are him trying to negotiate with missiles. The fact that he's not hitting Kyiv is hard tonight. That he's focusing on infrastructure and not government buildings, that's a signal." The Ukrainian glares. "A signal to who? The families freezing in the dark?" He has a point. Because right now, Elena's apartment is one of those going dark. Her lights flicker, stay on, flicker again. Then the entire building plunges into black. No fridge, no heat. Only the pale glow of her phone screen and the distant rumble of air defense. Her son walks into the hallway, phone flashlight on. "Is it Russia again?" he asks. She doesn't answer. She doesn't need to. At the substation, her husband and his team watch the voltage drop on their screens. Lines go red, then gray, then vanish. They switch to emergency procedures, rerouting what they can, isolating what they must. They've done this so many times it feels like a brutal game, sacrificing one district to keep another alive, praying the generators hold. He gets a text from his wife. No power. We're okay. He doesn't have time to reply. In Moscow, officials prepare their own narrative. On state TV, anchors will soon talk about precision strikes against military infrastructure and NATO-backed energy targets. They'll show explosions with triumphant music, spin the blackout as proof that Ukraine can't survive without Russia. In private, Russian analysts know the truth. They haven't broken Ukraine yet, but they can make every negotiation table feel like it's sitting on a fault line. Back in Berlin, Trump's team pushes hard. They talk about a grand bargain. Russia stops pounding the grid. Ukraine gets a ceasefire and security guarantees. Europe gets to stop worrying about a new refugee wave every winter. The price, of course, is territory. Some parts of Donbass, maybe the status of Crimea, maybe special zones with fuzzy sovereignty that sound technical on paper and feel like amputation in real life. The Ukrainian delegation listens. They know how many transformers are left in warehouses. They know how many missiles and drones Russia still has. They know how thin their air defense stocks are running. They also know the names of towns wiped off the map. There is no good choice on this table, only bad ones. And worse ones. In Kiev, Olena and her son sit at the kitchen table, candles flickering. Outside, the city is strangely beautiful in the blackout. Starlight finally visible over a capital that usually glows all night. She scrolls through news on her phone until the battery dips low. Another massive strike. Another list of regions hit. Another statement from a Western politician condemning the attack and promising more air defense systems. She reads about the Berlin talks, about Trump saying peace is closer than ever. She sees the word guarantees and doesn't know whether to laugh or cry. Guarantees feel thin when you can see your breath in your own kitchen. She types a comment she doesn't send. Make any deal you want, just don't do it with my lights off. In the Berlin conference room, the American envoy gets a fresh update. Despite the size of the strike, Ukraine's grid is still standing. Cities are damaged, some power is out, but the system hasn't collapsed. Repair crews are already rolling, even with missiles still falling in some regions. He looks across the table at the Ukrainians. You're still standing, he says quietly. He couldn't turn you off. The chief Ukrainian negotiator gives a tired, bitter smile. We've gotten very good at working in the dark, he says. But that doesn't mean we want to live there. He leans forward. So tell me honestly, this deal that's closer than ever, how much of my country do I have to turn off for it to work? There's no easy answer. Because while missile fragments are still cooling in Ukrainian streets, the spreadsheets in Washington and Brussels are updating too. How much aid is left? How many air defense missiles? How long until voters ask why they're paying to keep someone else's lights on? In a speech to the cameras later, Trump will stand in front of a row of flags and talk about impressive progress in Berlin, about very strong security guarantees and a realistic path to peace. He'll say Ukraine is closer than ever to ending the war. He won't mention the substation where Olena's husband is still working under emergency lighting. He won't mention the technicians freezing in unheated control rooms, the repair crews driving out at dawn to a smoking transformer yard, the surgeons operating by generator hum when a missile knocks out hospital power. But you should, because that's where the real negotiations are happening. Not just in Berlin, but in every blackout. Russia is betting that it can make Ukrainians so tired, so cold, so scared that they'll accept a deal they hate, Ukraine is betting that it can survive the dark long enough to get a deal that doesn't feel like defeat. And in the middle, the United States and Europe are betting that they can promise enough missiles, money, security guarantees to make that second bet possible, without stepping directly into war themselves. As dawn creeps over Kiev, Olena's lights flicker again. Once, twice. Then the power returns with a harsh buzz. The fridge hums. The heater coughs and whirs back to life. Her son cheers, then groans as the Wi-Fi takes its time coming back. She plugs her phone into the wall, watching the battery icon turn green. In Berlin, negotiators stagger back to their hotel rooms after another night of talks that produced more draft language than real answers. In Moscow, planners review strike results and prepare for the next wave. The lights came back on. They can always go off again. Sometime soon there will be a headline: historic peace deal signed, or talks collapse as new missile wave hits Ukraine. Both are possible, but whatever headline you read, remember this. While one man on TV says peace is closer than ever, someone else is flipping real switches on real missiles aimed at real cities. And in those cities, people like Olena aren't thinking about geopolitics or security guarantees. They're thinking about whether the lights will stay on long enough to cook breakfast, and whether the next siren means they're about to lose another piece of their country, or just another night to the dark.